So,
Hi,
hello
Madeline.
everyone. Oh,
Go ahead,
sorry.
Carol. Go ahead.
Sorry. This is the July 2025 review for the new. Um, we're pleased to have Bev Laubert um, from the Administration for Community Living talking to us today about um, just lots of different things that new state ombudsmen need to know about. So I'm going to turn it over, and Bev, if you want to do any other um, bio information. I will say that Bev has been the uh, state ombudsman in Ohio, actually multiple times, which is kind of cool to be able to take a break and then come back. But so she is at the national level now, but with a world of experience being a state ombudsman. So turning it over to you, Bev.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity, Carol. This will be new that we're doing it in this format. So I'm using very similar slides that I do when I do the in-person orientation. It's just a little bit different because I'm not able to like be in the room with you and do, like test the feedback. And so but feel free to just speak up. There are just a few of you here, so don't hesitate to just speak up if you have a question or want me to slow down or stop or so on. This is really for you to make sure that you are grounded in your new job as the state ombudsman. And so I want to adapt to meet your needs. I will also say that the way my notes printed are backwards, so bear with me if I have to switch my papers around. But I'm going to go ahead and just talk about, we're going to give you an overview of the Administration for Community Living, which there have been some changes recently, and I'll touch on that a little bit. And then talk about what it is to get started as the state ombudsman. Jenna, you are obviously the newest, and most people just jump right in and have this orientation after they've been on the job for a while. So I don't know if that's a plus or a minus for you, honestly. And then I'm going to go over the functions and responsibilities of the state ombudsman as we outline them in the federal regulation and the Older Americans Act. So that part's a little boring, but what I'm going to do is talk about some of the things that are newer. And so when you're talking with your colleagues who have more experience in other states, they may talk about the new provisions of the rule. So I want you to know what changed in the rule in 2024. And then I usually have a couple special topics that I focus on, and I'm going to handle these just through the rule discussion, but it's implementation of the rule, deadlines, and so on, and then fiscal issues that are a little bit different, but also timely because there's an August 1st deadline related to expenditures that I just want to focus on for you, so you have an orientation to that. And then, of course, we'll have time for discussion. I'm going to try to go through the slides quickly. The parts with the rule language is there, so I'm not going to read it to you. I just wanted you to have it for reference. And obviously, I'm not putting all of the rules in the slides, but the things that I wanted to talk about today. And there will be lots of opportunities to focus on various areas if needed. So I'll start with the mission of ACL. We are part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The Administration for Community Living was created in around 2012 when there was a change in administration, and we went from being the Administration on Aging to merging with a different agency, the Administration on Disabilities, and some other programs were brought in. So we became the Administration for Community Living, focused on helping people live in their communities as long as possible, and not forgetting about those people who are living in long-term care facilities. And really, the Ombudsman program is the program that helps residents of long-term care facilities more than any other Older Americans Act or disability program. So the Administration for Community Living is made up of various what we call centers, and it's a little bit confusing. You're coming in at an interesting time because there has been a signal from the Department of Health and Human Services that our agency will be reorganized, and the 2026 budget proposal by the president has us merging with the Administration for Children and Families. And so our budget shows us as the Administration for Children, Families, and Communities. Having said that, I want to emphasize that we are ACL now, and we anticipate going forward. We will still have the ACL identity. So, we've had a couple of false starts with a couple of organizations that started calling us by by another agency name, and we've had to say, nope, we are still the Administration for Community Living, and we anticipate still having that identity when we're in a larger agency. And what happens in the future, we can't really predict. What I can say, though, is that I've removed some centers, some offices from these slides, because as of a week ago, Monday, it'll be 2 weeks, this coming Monday, many people from our agency were subject to the federal reduction in force, and that we have in our structure these other centers, but we no longer have the staff in those centers. So I don't want to dwell on that too much, but it does have an impact on some of the work that I do. So I'll mention that as I go. So the Administration on Aging is one of the centers and administers the Older Americans Act. We have a Deputy Assistant Secretary for Aging, Carrie Benson, and Carrie as the Deputy Assistant Secretary, also serves in the role that is required by the Older Americans Act as the Director of the Office of Long-Term Care Ombudsman Programs. So I work within the immediate office of the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Aging. I report directly to Carrie as the National Ombudsman Program Coordinator. And so Carrie and I are the Ombudsman staff at ACL. Then we also have an Office of Elder Justice and Adult Protective Services, Supportive and Caregiver Services, Nutrition and Health Programs, and Office of American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian Programs. These programs and offices follow the Older Americans Act. So these are programs and services that are funded and authorized through the Older Americans Act. And the directors of each of those offices reports to Carrie. We have a separate Administration on Disabilities, which is another center at ACL that provides grant administration for developmental disability councils in each state, the protection and advocacy system in each state, and they have different names, but most of them call themselves Disability Rights, and then the state. So Disability Rights Ohio, Disability Rights Michigan, I think, I'm not sure. So they all kind of have that, that moniker. And then they also work with Centers for Independent Living, who have staff that assist people in maintaining their independence in the community as much as possible, focused on people with disabilities. Then the Center for Innovation and Partnership, or we call CIP, the part of that center that we work with in the Ombudsman program is the Office of Healthcare Information and Counseling. You may be familiar with the SHIP in your state that is funded with CMS funding. And that office within ACL provides support to those state programs. And then we also have a National Institute on Disability and Independent Living Rehabilitation Research, or NIDLR, at ACL. They are our research arm. We previously had, or in our organizational chart, we also have a Center for Policy and Evaluation that includes an Office of Performance and Evaluation. That is one of the offices that no longer has staff, and they work with states on their state program report and data analysis for Older Americans Act data. So one of the things that is changing in my role is that I, at least temporarily, am working with states on their SPR, their state program report that is submitted through OAPS, the Older Americans Act Performance System, the same system that you use to submit your National Ombudsman Reporting System, or NORS report. So it's just a little bit of an expansion of my responsibilities in terms of the data part of my work. So just to kind of give you a quick rundown of roles, the Office of Ombudsman Programs has a director. The Older Americans Act is very specific about what the office does. And so my role is primarily to communicate with you, provide consultation to you and to other federal agencies. So I work with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services on long-term care issues. There are occasionally, let's say, a federal agency like CMS decides that they want to issue a new rule. We'll use the staffing rule, for example. That has its own kind of sordid history, but the staffing rule. So when CMS was initially issuing the staffing rule, they have to present that rule and put it into clearance within the Department of Health and Human Services. And one of my jobs is to review those policy changes through the clearance process. And so kind of have a heads up of what's coming, opportunity to ask questions, provide feedback if necessary. And then I also work with the Federal Office of Inspector General at HHS and the Department of Justice on long-term care issues. A couple of other agencies as well. So that just kind of gives you a flavor of some of the external work that I do that you may not see on a day-to-day basis. And then providing technical assistance to you is really the best part of this job. It's the reason I decided to apply for this job after being a state ombudsman. I was the state ombudsman in Ohio for 26 years. And before that, had ombudsman roles. So 33 years as an ombudsman in Ohio. And then had a one-year break where I was the director of the State Unit on Aging at the end of a governor's administration. Rather than them bring somebody new in, I just took that role for a year to wrap up an administration and then went back to the job. So I thought, when this opportunity was available, I thought, I've been a local ombudsman, I've been a state staff person, I've been the state ombudsman. I might as well end my career by at the federal level. So, and really, it truly is one of the best parts of my job is talking with you day by day. After this call, I have a call with a state ombudsman who's working on some policies and has a question. And those are just my best days, being able to interact with you. I do data review. So every January 31st or before that, between October and January 31st, sometimes a little later, you will submit your NORS report through the Older Americans Act Performance System, or OAPS. And I review that data. So starting when I start usually mid-January, seeing that somebody has submitted a report, I jump in. I have a process that I use to review your reports. And as I review them, I will either send them back. Actually, I think Wisconsin is one of the states where I often just say, okay, approved, and don't have questions, because state ombudsmen just do such a great job. And Kim has done an excellent job. Jenna, you have big shoes to fill in your OAPS report, I will tell you. And but typically I'll just ask some questions. They aren't tough questions. They're questions like, or ask requests for correction, like you're supposed to put in your sources of funding. And if your source of funding is not in our standardized list, you have to list the source of funding. Many state ombudsmen forget to do that. So I send it back and say, please add your source of federal funding. So just little things like that. And so the reports are due January 31st. And I typically get everything wrapped up by April 1st in terms of review, comment back to you, resubmission or correction from you, and then getting them finally accepted. So it's a fun part of the year. I enjoy spring because I like looking at your reports, and there are some narrative sections of the report too. And NORC does do a couple of sessions toward the end of the calendar year to prepare you for doing that. So there's also the NORS course that they've developed now. So there's a lot of opportunity for you to learn how to do your NORS report. And then I'm always here to help you with it as well. And then I do grant management questions like, we haven't fully expended our funds that had this purpose. Can I change my project? What kind of approval do I need? Can I spend money on pencils? Can I spend money on volunteer recognition? So I answer those questions as well. And then obviously we fund the National Ombudsman Resource Center because, as I said, Carrie and I are the Ombudsman staff, and Carrie is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Aging and has a lot of responsibility. So we would not be able to help all of you and provide the support that all of you have without the Ombudsman Resource Center. So we give them a grant. They're currently in the last year of their 5-year grant, and then we rebid that next year and keep going. So when NORC asks you for input on what they should do, please give it to them because they take it very seriously, and we want to make sure that the Resource Center is meeting the needs that you have in your day-to-day roles.
So Bev, Odessa has a question.
Okay. Go ahead.
Bev, for me, I didn't receive information about signing an account for OAPS. Do we have access to that, or is it like our director will fill it out and submit it?
No, you should have access. I really thought I gave you access. So if you just send me an email that includes your cell phone number, then
Okay.
I will check and make sure. We've had some technical difficulties with the system in the last few months, and with the staffing transition, it sometimes takes a little longer to get things going. So just send me an email reminder and I'll check our user list.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing. This is Carrie. This is what she looks like. This is her bio. It's also on our website. She was the State Unit on Aging Director in Minnesota. She had worked at ACL 20 years before she came back to us as our Deputy Assistant Secretary. She was a staff person. So we're really glad to have Carrie. She's awesome, really supportive, loves the Ombudsman program, and knows the program well, having worked with a strong program in Minnesota. So just a few things to think about as you're getting started in your role. I always recommend that you kind of do an assessment of yourself, of your program. Think about where you're organizationally located. What are the implications of that? In Wisconsin, you're a separate state agency. What does that mean, and how might that be different in terms of your authority from other states? Are you centralized or decentralized? Are all of your staff, all of your ombudsman representatives, your staff, or do you work with their agencies on aging or nonprofits to administer the program? Because that has other implications in terms of when you write your policies and procedures, when you write rules for your program, when you monitor your representatives. all of that structure matters in how you go about doing that. Volunteer engagement. How active are volunteers in your program? Is that something that has been steady in your state? Is it something that you need to work on? Really, if we didn't have volunteer ombudsmen, and there are a few states who don't, but without volunteer ombudsmen, it really impedes your ability to provide regular and timely access for residents. Just having the ability of somebody out there that residents can talk to. And then think about the history of systems advocacy. Did you know the program before you became an ombudsman? And what was your perspective of the program from your vantage point? If you didn't know the program before you became an ombudsman, what have you learned about it? What were the kind of the external perspective on how your program operated? And is that how you want to continue your program? Are you going to tweak it? Are you just going to, make it yours, keep doing what the former state ombudsman did? Or are you going to, are you identifying things that could change? The Ombudsman Resource Center has a resource that is I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it was a kind of a comprehensive assessment that is really helpful in walking through kind of the do's and don'ts, the things that you are required to do through the Older Americans Act and so on, and just has you kind of think about, one thing I remember is, do you have a toll-free number? Who answers that toll-free line? Just so it takes you through the nitty-gritty details of running an ombudsman program. And that is a good resource for you to use to get acquainted with your program if you're not already acquainted with it. And then look at the program's history of systems advocacy. This is something that really fluctuates. The law and the rule require you to comment on law, policy, and regulation, to provide input, provide resident perspective on long-term care issues. And some of it, it changes based on organizational location sometimes. It changes based on the personality of the organization. Are you in an organization that is very hierarchical and controlled, where there are going to be processes that your supervisor wants you to follow? And do those processes comply with the requirement that you are an independent advocate? Or has the program had a history of systems advocacy that is visible and appreciated and called upon by legislators? Do legislators initiate contact with your program? Do you have a relationship with legislators, with other state agencies, Medicaid, and insurance, and the other agencies, that the survey agency, and so on? So think about what that history of systems advocacy has been like, and then think through what you think needs to be changed, if anything, in that area. And then look at yourself, your personal strengths and your development needs, because not everybody is a good public speaker. Not everybody enjoys public speaking. Not everybody is good with budgets. Not everybody enjoys looking at data and doing calculations of percentages. And so look at what your strengths are and the areas that you need to develop, and do that in the context of your office's structure. Do you have staff? Do you have local representatives who might have these skills? In one state, there is a local ombudsman representative who the state ombudsman uses to do systems advocacy, and she's awesome. She opens doors for him to get meetings with legislators. She draws attention to long-term care issues. She's a local ombudsman, but he noticed that she had those skills, and he taps her to do that. So look at your whole office as well. So if you're not somebody who likes public speaking, but you have somebody who really does, then work with them and make sure that the things that they're communicating are your messages as the state ombudsman. There's nothing wrong with that. And it can give you a stronger, deeper program. And then also look at your experience with long-term services and supports. Were you a provider at one point? Have you provided long-term services and supports as a staff person in a facility, or providing home care, or in a Medicaid agency? What have you done? And, you know, kind of what perspective of LTSS do you bring to the job? And then how do you use that experience and that knowledge, that expertise, and then bring in your advocacy skills with that knowledge to be a successful ombudsman? So, you know, having knowledge of long-term care is great. I always say ombudsmen don't have to, you can't enforce or implement regulations for long-term care facilities. Sometimes we would like to, because we feel like the survey agency is not doing it. So you don't have to implement it, but you really should know those regulations, because knowing them is going to help you then apply your skill as an advocate. So, you know, discharge and transfer, biggest complaint that we always get, knowing what all the requirements are for discharge and transfer, and then being able to use your powers of persuasion and advocacy to use those rules for the benefit of a resident of a long-term care facility. You have lots of support, obviously, the resource center, but think about the support that you have in your office and in your agency as well. Not only your representatives that you have on your staff or in your local programs, but what agency support do you have? Who are your friends in your agency? Get to know them. When I was a state ombudsman, I would say my best friends were the fiscal chief and the communications director. I spent most of my time kind of getting to know them and having them get to know me, because I wanted them to trust me. So when a reporter called about a facility closure, they trusted that I could handle that and they didn't need to look over my shoulder. And then fiscally, I wanted our fiscal director, chief, to know what the program does and the day-to-day. I would sit in his office and talk to him about my day, talk to him about you know, a tough case or something that a local ombudsman called me about. And that educated him about the needs of the program. So then when it came time to establish budgets and figure out how much Title III of money from the Older Americans Act grants they were going to give to the Ombudsman program, he knew what the program's needs were, because he knew me and knew that I was a good steward of those funds. You know, I would talk to him about how I reviewed a budget for a local program and what I criticized and what I supported. So he knew to trust me, that funds that I was authorized to give to our local programs and manage were going to be used well for the benefit of residents. Legislative staff, you have a legislative liaison, you have somebody who's focused, and what are their priorities? Do they give any deference to the priorities of the state ombudsman? Make sure that they know what the long-term care issues are. Again, this is going to depend on the type of agency you are in. If it's an agency that might also, in addition to administering meals and transportation and the Older Americans Act services, might also be the operating agency for Medicaid waivers with the Medicaid agency as a partner. So, and that impacts what the legislative priorities are going to be of the legislative staff in the agency. It's sort of like, how big is their pond? Are they a big fish, small fish? Is the agency a big fish, small fish? So you want to know, or small pond. So you kind of want to know that, so you know what you can rely on. Can you rely on that legislative person to alert you if they see a new piece of legislation drop or be introduced? and to give you updates on it, or are you going to need to take on that responsibility yourself to keep track of what's going on in the legislature? So getting to know that person and kind of what their limits are and what their priorities are, and who sets their priorities is important too. Data system, get to know your own data system that feeds into NORS. I won't focus much on that because we're in the summer. Fall is the time we're going to be really focused on data, and so we'll have lots of opportunities to do that. But get to know your data system, what reports it will produce for you, whether you want it to do more for you, and how you use that data, and is the data reliable, or do you need to work with your local representatives on better data entry so you have stronger data? So get to know, read some cases that are in your data system, review them, see what's being entered, ask questions. And then training, of course, your own training, as well as what training do you provide to your representatives and what training do they need? Asking them is really important because they may feel afraid to let you know what they don't know, especially as a new state ombudsman. You are their new leader, and they want to get to know you. And my advice is to call them up. Just talk to your local representatives, your staff, and just say, tell me about your day. Tell me about a case. What's a good day for you as an ombudsman? What's a bad day for you as an ombudsman? And then let them know that when they have those good days and bad days, you want to hear about it, because that's how you can best be an advocate at the systems level, is knowing what's happening day to day in those cases and in their visits to facilities. So you easily have things in your head and on your tongue. If you're running into a legislator, you're running into the Medicaid director at lunch, and you see them, and you just have a couple bullet points, a couple talking points to say what's going on in your program. Always have those things in mind with the perspective of being an advocate, always taking an opportunity to speak up and say something. So I'm going to take a break for a drink first, and then I'll walk through functions and responsibilities. And again, I'm not going to walk through all of these individually, but I'm going to point out a few things that have changed, just to demonstrate how we are focused on strengthening your role as a state ombudsman. So our rules are at, the citation is 45 CFR, Code of Federal Regulations 1324. And they all have odd numbers. So 0.11 is policies, 0.13 is functions and responsibilities. So get to know the rules. You have them. I'm not going to go through them all. But functions and responsibilities, when we modified the rule that was initially effective in 2016, we made some modifications in 2024. We did in 2023, we put them out for comment. We got several comments. I'm going to touch on a few of those. But when we revised the comment, we revised the rule. We added the words "and authority" because we had some comments from state ombudsmen that, yeah, you say that's my responsibility, it's in my job description, but they don't let me do it. And so especially with regard to systems advocacy. So we wanted to make sure that we are clear that we expect the state ombudsman to have the authority for leadership and management of the office. And then in representing the interests of residents before governmental agencies, this is part of your systems advocacy, the analyzing, commenting, and monitoring the development of information or implementation of laws. And the part that I highlight here is that such determinations of the office are determinations of the office and shall not necessarily represent the determinations or positions of the agency that you're housed in. So I don't know if you heard that, my cat's here and just meowed. If so, we're clear in the rule that you decide what, let's say you want to advocate for an increase in personal needs allowance for nursing home residents, which is the money that they get to keep for their own needs. You want to increase that. Let's say your state agency, you might be in a Department of Aging, maybe they say, no, our sister agency, the Medicaid agency, says they can't afford that because if the resident gets to keep more, then the Medicaid agency has to pay more to meet their daily rate at that facility. So they might say, no, we can't support that because of budget problems, et cetera. And they don't want you to advocate for that. Well, we're clear in the Older Americans Act and the rule that that is your job, to represent the interests of residents. And if residents are telling you they don't have enough money monthly to meet their personal needs, then you should be advocating for an increase. And so we put this language in here saying, to kind of tell the state agencies, it's not your fault. You don't have to deal with it. We're saying that the positions of the ombudsman don't have to be your position. So it's okay, let it go. Sorry, Finch. And then coordinating and promoting the development of citizen organizations. That's another area I should probably put on that slide about kind of getting to know your office, is your relationship with families and if you have any citizen organizations in your state. We talk about having a unified statewide ombudsman program that you are the head of. This can be challenging sometimes depending on the strength of your local programs and how they might. There's a state that has at least one state, multiple states have associations of local ombudsmen, and there is a National Association of Local Ombudsmen. So they might come up kind of with their own advocacy agenda, and that's something that you need to navigate because the rule says that you are the head of the office and you make the determinations. Designation, the rule kind of talks about having a process for designation. Something for you to think about is what happens if you want to change the designation of a local program. If you are a decentralized program, what is that process? We made a change in our training language, saying that anyone who has access to residence files, records, or other information of the program should undergo training and certification to be a designated representative of the office. This comes up sometimes with maybe administrative staff, people who answer the phone, their questions, do they have to be a certified ombudsman, for example? So that part of the rule will help you with that. Ombudsman program information, disclosure of program information is another big area that creates some consternation in states. And the rule says that, again, this is just kind of a companion to that training language, that all program staff or volunteers who have access. So if it's somebody who has access to your data system, they may be somebody who answers the phone and you might give them access to the data system to be able to know if they've been a previous client. If they have access to your data system and the identities of residents that you help, they really need to be a representative of the office. So you need to get them trained and certified. Then disclosure. I just want to emphasize that it's not just the ombudsman case file that is confidential. It's the files, records, and other information maintained by the program. So if your staff communicate by email with a provider about their discharge policies, or you communicate by email with a family group about an agenda for an upcoming meeting, those are confidential communications because it is information maintained by the program. So if a provider would come and say, I want your your communication with that family group about their agenda, because we disliked how that meeting went, or we, didn't like one of the issues that they raised. That information is confidential. And if somebody comes to you and says, according to the Wisconsin Public Records Law, I am making a request for your records. Your records are not public records. Your records are subject to the disclosure prohibitions in the law, in the Older Americans Act and the rule. So you need to kind of work through that. There are processes in states that you should get to know. There may be a place for those kind of reviews. You would want to talk with your legal counsel and so on. So those are disclosure of information is one of the areas that I get a lot of calls about from ombudsmen. We provided, at the request of ombudsman, in the last version of the rule, we provided some criteria for disclosure, especially when there are issues related to residents who may not be able to give you consent, and you're just not sure about whether to disclose a record or not. So we have some suggested criteria in there for your policies and procedures. Fiscal management, this is a big area. The rule says that you determine the use of fiscal resources appropriated or otherwise available for the operation of the office. So you should be the one making decisions. If you have local programs, looking at their budgets, looking at their plans for the year and so on, that would be a good role for you to know that they are complying with your policies and procedures and using grant funds on allowable expenditures. So this part so I've told you 1324 is the section of the rules of the Code of Federal Regulations that apply to the Ombudsman Program. Section 1321 is in a different section of the Older Americans Act rules and applies to state agencies and area agencies on aging. And this is one of those sections that it's sort of a companion to the part that I just showed you, your responsibilities for fiscal management. In the state agency section of the rule, it says that you are to that the state agency is to fund the program or expend on the program no less than they spent on the program out of Title III and Title VII than they spent in 2019. That year changes occasionally, but it didn't change for 20 years. The last time it changed to 2019, it had previously been 2000. And then they must give you verifiable expenditure information for the annual certification and minimum expenditure. So August 1st, which is coming up, and we can talk about this separately, individually, if you'd like, you have a deadline of submitting to us a form that is signed by the State Unit on Aging and signed by you, attesting that in 2020, federal fiscal year 2024, the program or the agency expended at least what they spent in 2019. And that, as you know, that deadline is coming up. They give you the form to sign, but they should also give you any backup information you want to be able to say, yes, I feel comfortable signing this, that it's true, that this statement is true. So take a look at that, call me. August 1st is coming. I can't extend that deadline, but I will tell you that it's often missed. So don't worry about the deadline of August 1st. If you have questions, the best thing to do, it's better to get it right than it is to get it on time. And then fiscal management and determination of resources. We repeat for the state agencies your responsibilities in doing that as a way to bolster your role. Another part of the fiscal management rule in 1321 for states is when they're doing their intrastate funding formula, that they have to talk about how they're appropriating or not appropriating, excuse me, allocating funds for the ombudsman program. So that should be discussed in their interstate funding formula, which has to be in their state plan on aging. An annual report is another big part of your responsibilities. In addition to doing your NORS report, you should write a report, and it doesn't have to be long. I got one a couple of weeks ago that I think was just a few pages, that in addition to providing the data about your program, should also talk about the issues your programs face and the issues that residents face, and should contain policy, regulatory, and legislative recommendations to address identified problems and barriers. The Ombudsman Resource Center has a good a good collection of annual reports, and I have annual reports. I try to give everything to the Resource Center that I receive, but sometimes I might miss one. So ask one or both of us for samples if you'd like, and we can give you some samples, some that are very short and get the job done, and some that are longer narratives. And these are just a few clips from some of those annual reports that we've looked at. So, there's one that this one about dietary issues, goes into a lot of detail, even has pictures from cases. And then another one's very attached to the program data and detailing what's in that data. Another one uses a catchy infographic. A lot of states are using infographics now. It's a good way to get a lot of information across in an easy way. It doesn't have to be difficult. We don't want it to make it a huge burden. I tell everybody, and I will tell you, that doing the annual report was my biggest failure as a state ombudsman. I just could never, I just worked so hard on it, and I had staff who were working hard on it, and I was just never satisfied. And so it would just go through review after review after review, and that was my biggest failure. And sometimes it didn't get done because of that. So I encourage you to just try to keep it simple so you can be more successful than I was. MOUs, there are a couple memoranda of understanding that are required in the Ombudsman rule. One has been in existence for a long time, and that is an MOU with legal assistance programs. You can either do that with the legal assistance developer in your state, depending on kind of their role with legal assistance. The idea is, however, so this will help you decide who to have the MOU with. The rule is, the purpose of the rule is really to kind of outline how you're going to communicate. What kinds of cases will legal assistance help you with? What kinds of things will ombudsmen do? Are your legal aid attorneys skilled in doing discharge hearings, and are you going to refer discharge cases to them? Or are you going to refer Medicaid appeals cases to them? It's just a conversation that you then put in writing about how are we going to work together. And if you look at the Older Americans Act and the language in Title VII about coordination of elder justice and elder rights programs in the state, that will help you kind of get in the right frame of mind for having an MOU with legal assistance. And then the one that we added in 2024 is an MOU with the State Survey Agency. And we added it because we heard from so many states difficulties in communication or cooperation with the State Survey Agency. And so we added this to require you to outline communication protocols and procedures with the state agency. And again, the Resource Center is collecting examples of those and can provide you with some support in developing those. And then we have several in the rule that are recommended MOUs. We had a request that we add the State Mental Health Authority. I mean, you can have an MOU with anybody you want to have an MOU with, but we added at the request of a commenter of the State Mental Health Authority, because so many people in smaller assisted living or board and care, or whatever kinds of facility, personal care homes have mental illness, that was important to have a good connection with the mental health authority to help those residents. And then this was just also something that we responded to favorably in a comment on the rule, that the rule says that the ombudsman shall carry out any other, it's kind of like the typical job description, other duties as assigned, says that the Assistant Secretary for Aging at ACL could give you other duties that they determine to be appropriate. And we were asked to add this qualifier that whatever else ACL asks you to do really needs to be consistent with the functions of the program as authorized by the Older Americans Act, to make sure that we keep the program pure. NORS, again, I'm not going to go through this. We'll have other opportunities to talk about data. So just kind of in summary, embrace the unique authority. I haven't said it yet in this meeting, and I'm surprised that Carol hasn't called me on it, but you are one of 53. And that is a big responsibility. There are only 53 people in the United States, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and Guam who have your job. It's a unique job. There aren't very many organizations or programs that have federal regulations that say this is the job of this person in each state. And so take it seriously, but embrace it, because it's a really cool job. I wouldn't have done it for 33 years if I didn't love it. It's an opportunity to help people every single day, even if it's looking at your staff data or reviewing a case or approving a budget. All of that goes toward your advocacy for residents. Approving somebody's budget to recognize volunteers in their local program is a way to support the volunteers who then are going to be visiting residents and advocating for them. Be sure you know what your barriers and remedies are. Stay aware of those. You keep them on the top of your mind. Know who your supporters are. Who are the people that you can go to at the end of a day or in the middle of the day and say, I've got this tough situation, and you feel confident that they're going to support you. Build a relationship with your local representatives or your state staff if you're a centralized program. Always celebrate your successes, no matter what they are. I have a local ombudsman who still sends me a text message every now and then about a case that he worked on. He felt like it was the biggest success of his career, and it continues to be, because every now and then he sends me a text message about it. And it's important to celebrate those, because there are days where you're going to feel defeated after a long day, and discharge hearings that were lost, or a facility closure that didn't go well and residents were harmed. There are going to be days that you're going to feel defeated, or the personal needs allowance doesn't get approved by your legislature, but you need to have those successes. I always kept a folder that was called reminders, and I still have it. In fact, I took it from my job, of photographs or notes from residents or things like that just reminded me of the important work of the ombudsman. The one I remember a lot is a resident who wanted to pay me. I was a local ombudsman, and she wanted to give me a donation for the work that I had done for her, but she was a Medicaid recipient. She didn't have money. So I got a card in the mail from her one day, and it had the rebate from her hearing aid batteries in case I could benefit from the rebate. So, like $2 off the next round of hearing aid batteries. She gave that to me because that's all she had, so those are the kinds of things I have in my reminders folder, just to remember the important work that you do and the impact that you have. And let's see, whoops, yeah, I think that's it. Okay, let me stop sharing. Okay.
So, Bev, Kim hasn't seen the August 1st form. It has been sent out, right, to the state unit directors?
No. So this is what happened. we populated it with your 2019 numbers, and we were going to send it out. Normally that would go out from our fiscal office. And we were about 2 days away from having it sent out when all of the fiscal staff were they were fired. So, but I have it and I can send it to you. So I will, if you need yours, Kim, I can send it to you.
Otherwise, I did just send a message to our budget office to see if they've got it. So
Okay.
I'll tag you if I need you. Otherwise, take it off your
Okay.
to-do list.
Okay.
Don't worry about it.
Yep.
I'm
And
so sorry for all of that.
yeah, I'll tell you. And there was also something related to OAPs and the state program reports. We were
Yeah.
about to send something out through our regional administrators, and then at the end of the day, we had no regional administrators, so
Yeah,
we have to
right.
figure out another way to communicate.
Together.
Odessa would like it sent to her.
Okay.
Me too.
Oh,
I'll get it to you.
and Mississippi. You know, I'm glad we recorded this because I could see you guys. Oh my God, your eyes were like, ooh, and ooh. So this will be on the private side under new ombudsman. And you can go back and scroll through it for whatever part that you kind of recall or whatever. Bev, this is incredible information, very, very helpful. And it really, I think, especially because these guys are all just very, very new. I mean, even 8 months is not very long in this. We consider people to be new for 2 years. So this information is extremely helpful. I'm going to stop recording, but and I know we're over, but if you guys want to hang out, that is perfectly fine.